without further ado, we'll present Diane Alonso, and just so that everybody else knows, Linda, I can't remember if I told you this or not, psychology and at the Shady Grove campus. So she will be presenting her second of 2 deliverables in the alternate delivery program.
Okay, thank you, Karen. All right, I'm going to go ahead and once again I have a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you all for coming out. I do appreciate it. And oops, actually, I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint. That's what I meant to do. And F5, there we go. All right, so I'm going to be talking today about a second deliverable that I did. The first one was a summary paper. This is a little different, or a lot different, but something I'm going to be using in my class. Let me start off with the problem that I'll be addressing. One of the things I want to be using in my class, because it is a cognitive psychology class, is I want it to be very experiment-based. So we're going to look at classic cognitive psychology experiments. Okay. They are important to understanding the concepts. I feel this is really central to the class. But they can be difficult to do during class. I often will have some sort of experiment up on the overhead, have students try to do it as a group. And that gets really tricky because some students can't see the screen very well. And when you're dealing with sensory or perceptual images, sometimes it's tricky. A lot of people trying to answer questions at once, it gets noisy, it gets confusing. So I find it is better when things are done in small groups or individually, which is also more closely related to how many of the experiments were done originally, and that's what I want to get through to them. Again, these can take up a lot of class time. Some of the experiments to be done properly are not just a one-time pass through, but you have to get used to the process, do some trial runs, and understand what it is you need to do, and then actually do the experiment. I think it would be nice for them to have done the experiment in many cases prior to coming to class. So typically what I've been doing in the past, and I've taught this class, I guess, several times over the past 5 years, is during class I bring them up an experiment, we stop, we do the experiment, I have to explain it to them, we try to do it so they get a chance to see what it is. It would be really great if they could do the experiment prior to class and maybe looking in the textbook. The textbook we're using has a lot of information about the experiments, and read up on it so they know what we're talking about when they get to class. Okay, so those are what I'm trying to address. And the benefits of providing it online include having the experiment with some follow-up exercises would allow them to free up class time so that we can really use it to discuss the experiments rather than just doing the experiments. And it's going to let students work at their own pace. Some of these experiments require that people work at variable speeds. They're not all going to be doing the same thing in the same time. We have reaction time experiments and things like that. The students will be able to work in a quiet environment, so they can be working by themselves. If they want to work in small groups, that would probably be fine too in most of these experiments. But they're not working in a big class with lots of people maybe talking during the experiments. And again, they can come to class more prepared because they can do them prior to class. Again, also before they can think of the concepts. I'm going to have some questions. We'll have them think about what the experiment's about prior to me telling them or really working through or discussing what the experiment's about. So they're going to come up with their own ideas. All right, so the benefits of the online experiments. So what I've done in this case is I created a group of tasks and made them available using adaptive release. So I wanted them to go through this structured process. And we start off basically with having them watch a video. And I'll show you the video quickly if you'd like, if we have time for it. Basically what this video is it has players count the number of times a basketball is passed. And I guess we could take a quick look at it. Whoops, there it goes. Let's see. Okay. Oh, that's later. Okay, so here's the experiment. So just count the number of times that the basketball is passed among the different players. It's a little fuzzy, but see if you can count that, and we'll. That's the video that happens. All right.
Ghosts playing basketball.
Right, it is a little funny. And actually what I'm going to do is, let's see, while looking at this, Alt-Tab, I'm going to bring up that video in my Blackboard just because I need to click on it to, actually I could just have marked it as reviewed, couldn't I? So let me go back to here. So we've reviewed it, and after they watch the video, they get to respond to the video. And in this response, I basically ask them what they saw. So let me sit down at this point. Okay, so I asked them how many times did they pass the ball. You can answer that if you want. And then going on to number 2. No, I didn't give an answer, sorry. I don't know, let's put in some general number, 17. Okay, save answer, and go on to number 2. Whoops. And then I think that's all it is. Let's see. There should be a second question. Oh, let's see. Did you notice anything else? If so, please indicate below. So at this point, everyone would be inputting their own answers, and they wouldn't have been discussing it. We'll talk about that in a moment. What we're going to do then is they'll submit it. We'll be okay with that. And getting back to this, they've answered the 2 questions on a survey. Then I have them watch the video again. Now, does anyone here notice anything unusual in the video?
Second ball showed up at some point in time.
Okay, second ball. Anything else? All right, I'm going to have,
Well, the girl walking.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
The girl walks through with an umbrella. Did everyone see that? And some people, 46% of the population, but when they, or the sample that saw this, didn't see it. It's very typical. Again, it's a very bad video, so you probably miss it for that reason, and being on the side.
You didn't see it?
But let me go ahead and really quickly. It's
I was
great.
watching the ball. So that's fair.
Well, that's okay. That's what you're supposed to do, actually. So if you watch it again, now watch it carefully, and look for something different. Don't count. So,
Yeah.
you see her going through with the
I
umbrella?
didn't see that at all. Yeah.
All right, so it's really an interesting phenomenon.
Huh.
And then I have them go back into, let's see, close this one out, I believe. Where's the other one? Okay, Blackboard. All right. Okay, I've got to go back to my deliverables. Here. So you watch it the second time, then you give a response to after the second viewing, and there are some questions. I'll go ahead and show you those questions. This time I do, most of the questions I just want them to be thinking. I'm not really worrying about the grade. This is not a graded exercise, and that the grade isn't going to count for anything, but I want the students to go back and think about it. So they've seen the video 2 times now. Now, what did you notice? So hopefully they saw it the second time. They saw the girl walking through the scene. And then on this one, if you didn't notice this the first time, why do you think this happened? So I want them to think about what the phenomenon is that's going on, so they have a chance to give me some sort of answer. And again, I'm not going to be reading these to see perfect answers. I want them to be thinking through the process. And the third question asks them to go back to the textbook and find the place in the textbook. Now, I don't necessarily want them to hunt. The idea is not that, but for them to go to the textbook and understand what it is that's going on. What is the explanation for what's happening? And then tell me who the experimenters are. And the reason I do this is this way I'll know if they have actually gone back to the textbook and looked, because I do want them to do this. If they do that correctly, then this is marked as completed, and they'll be able to go on to the next step. If not, they'll have to go back and fix it and figure out who it is. So that's going to be the one preventing question here. Everything else is a thought question. It's not going to be graded. And then I ask them to think about, they can use the book, they can discuss on their own, what does this experiment demonstrate? And that will close the test. I know I didn't complete, actually maybe it will.
You're logged in as me, so.
Ah, okay. So that's all right. We'll go ahead and close that off.
Very studious.
Yeah.
Very good,
I didn't
yes.
see the lady with the umbrella.
All right, so then I go back to, let's see, do I have to go to deliverables each time? Click OK to, click OK to review results. I knew I didn't have to go back, so there's my little OK button. And I didn't actually get the questions right, but since I'm here in the lab, I can mark that I've completed that exercise. So I'll go ahead and mark that. Having seen it a second time allows them to then get the reward, I hope, of seeing a Jing video that I put together explaining the phenomena. So here's the video real quickly. We don't have to watch the whole thing, but this is what I've done kind of quickly to explain the phenomena that happened. Oops.
You might want to make it smaller.
Yeah, I think smaller is good. Small size, okay.
Okay, now you've completed the experiment and the related exercises on inattentional blindness. And now you'll see a short video, PowerPoint presentation on attention and the topics of intentional blindness and change detection. So inattentional blindness is a phenomenon related to perception, in which a stimulus is not perceived even when the person is looking directly at it. And you may have experienced this when you did the experiment. In the experiment by Simons and Chabris, the observers watched a short film of teams passing a basketball. They were asked to count the number of passes and were asked if they noticed anything unusual. This is what you did. In your video, a woman walked through the scene carrying an umbrella. Many people probably did not notice this. Some may have. Simons and Chabris did also a second experiment, a similar one, in which a man walked through in a gorilla suit, stopped in the middle, and pounded his chest. The results showed that in both cases, as many as 46% of the observers failed to report either the woman or the gorilla. That's a pretty high percentage of people who didn't notice something directly in the middle of a scene. In a related experiment by Mack and Rock,
So I will go ahead and stop
observers
that
were
at this
asked to
point.
make a decision
Let's see.
on a
So you get the idea. It's a little 5-minute video that goes on to explain this and related phenomena in cognitive psychology. So, I'm sorry, what's the answer?
What's the cause? I want to.
Oh, it's inattentional blindness. I can continue on, or you all are welcome to go. Do you want me to continue on with the video?
You only see what you expect to see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you're
yeah.
focusing
You
on
only see what
one
you're looking
thing, you tend to miss other things in the scene when you're very focused on a particular task. And I'd be happy to play the video, but I can do that
Criminals
later.
get away with a lot of stuff, isn't it? They
Pardon?
do, it's like how criminals can get away with a lot of
Yeah,
stuff, right?
right.
They commit something in broad daylight with everybody looking at them, but everybody's so intent on watching the whatever else they don't
Same
see.
thing as a magician will say, if you're focusing on this, you may not see something else that's happening right in front of your face because you're so attuned to what's happening. So it is there. That particular video also talks about something called change blindness, which is another neat phenomenon. It takes them to another thing they can go to and look at. I have this also as a PowerPoint slide where they can click on the links that are highlighted there, so the students can go through. If they do want to learn more, they can click on the links. There's an experiment in change blindness, and I can show you this. I don't want to take up too much time, but there's more stuff that they'll be able to go onto because I do want it to serve as a reward for them. But that basically is the process and what I put together for them as a little nugget, and I think it works pretty nicely. I also did include, as John had recommended last time with the summary paper, I took item number 1, downloaded their answers to it, and put those there in an Excel spreadsheet so that they could see what other people, just as an example, what other people had done. So if you come out of here, and let's see, I'll go ahead on, and just go back. Let me do that. All right. Go there. I included down here the responses to basketball video 1, and that came up. That would also come up when they have completed the second time through. So this tells you this was in the very first survey that they took when it said how many times did the ball pass. So one person said 14, and this is kind of hard to read. And did you notice it? It said it was difficult to determine how many times the basketball was passed because it seemed as though there was more than one basketball. It was a blurry video. It looked as if some individuals might have been duplicated in the video. So they were explaining why they didn't see it the first time. And then I could do the same thing for the second answers and compare them.
And this is data from a prior class, obviously. It's not.
Well, it's my two students who did it today, who did
Gotcha.
for this particular one.
But the sequence of events, in a normal class, the students would be watching the video, doing the survey, blah, blah, blah. And then when they got to this stage, you could present data from a prior class?
That would be possible. Or what I was thinking is, I won't have it up. I guess this could be up closer to class time. I was thinking that something that could be put up after after everything's due.
Right, okay.
We'd said with the summary paper, because that was a 24-hour time frame, I posted after, but this might have to be like the day before the class or
Yeah,
something.
okay.
I posted.
So
I give them an end date and then post it so they could see what other people, even if
Gotcha.
it wasn't everyone, they could see what other people had, or we could bring it up in class even as part of our discussion, so we make it available.
So it might not be immediate gratification for the student that's working way ahead of everyone
Right,
else.
right,
But,
yeah,
Oh,
that's true.
pretty
So it
cool.
wouldn't be able to be posted right away, but it would be able to be posted either just before class maybe, or just after class, and they could go back and look at it. And again, this type of thing would be optional. They wouldn't have to look at it, but it's available to them.
But, and then it sounds like what you're saying, that they wouldn't be able to look at this until they'd actually done the experiment.
Right, they would have to do the experiment before they could see that, unless it was something we brought up in class, but they wouldn't be able to see it beforehand. But I think it's kind of nice, because then they can see what other people saw, and it gives them a chance to sort of see, you know, what were other people experiencing, and I think they'll see a lot of commonalities.
So what's the percentage of people, so I'm just wondering, because when you said you see anything funny, and these guys said somebody walking across with an umbrella, you know, I'm just wondering, what would be the likelihood that I watch that video again and not see that? So how many, I mean, what's the percentage of
How many
students that are, you know,
iterations?
unintentionally super extra blind?
I don't know. I haven't carried out that way. I only know it
I'm
for the
just
first
curious.
time. I mean, I think the second time, if I didn't tell them to really look, I may need to make the directions a little clearer, because I want them to look. And then, of course, when I show them the PowerPoint, it will say a woman, you know, they explain that the woman was walking through with the umbrella. So hopefully, if they didn't see it then, they'd go back and they'd look for the woman walking through with the umbrella.
We're telling them to look at the video the second time,
Yeah.
but not concentrate so hard on counting the basketballs, right? Just kind of look at the big picture. I can't remember if you did that or not. You might
I
have.
think I said something about watch it again and don't bother counting the passes and see if you see it. But yeah, there may be people who would miss it anyway. They're just, their mind's still focused, or they're just counting even without thinking because they counted before.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. I'll have to look at that when we get to this part in the class.
And it strikes me kind of cool too that the, you know, if you did this in a whole class,
Mhm.
like what you've done in the past, right? Watch the video, everybody counts. Well, did you see anything interesting? Whoever kind of pipes up first.
Yeah.
It's sort of, in a way, it might ruin the surprise a little bit.
Exactly.
So if they do it at home, that's more of a, you get more of a true experimenter.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right, because that's what happens in a lot of cognitive psychology experiments, is the things that you're not supposed to get. There's kind of that aha thing. And if one person gets it, then everyone gets it. You know, if there's a pattern or something like that, or something hidden that they see, as soon as, you're right, it taints all the other data, because you're not getting independent data back. So this way they'll get to see their own, they'll get to answer and think about it independently.
So would you, and let me, since I don't know any of the background, this is new, you haven't tried this
No.
in class, right? If this works well, will you make more of these for more of the experiments to be done outside of class?
Yes, I'm going to do one every week. I'm planning to basically run the class based on experiments as appropriate. The first week is overview, and the second week is we do a little bit of neuro background. But after that, each week should have at least one experiment. The class itself, the textbook that I'm using has a software component to it that has these cog lab experiments. Even if it didn't, though, there's a lot of stuff out there that addresses these experiments. So prior to the class, what I'm thinking is that sometime, if the class is on Wednesday, I would post probably either Thursday or Friday, and give myself a day or two to get them up there, an experiment with an exercise and some sort of response, and that they would have 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, you could make it due Tuesday, you know, give them a time frame to do it, and then we would basically use that as a jumping off point for class, because I'm really trying to back off. I'm a lecturer and I'm trying to back off from that, so I'm really hoping that we can use these major experiments as a starting point for the class, and that we can say, now what does this tell us, and what have we learned from that, and what does it tell us about attention in this case? How does it relate to the textbook? How does it relate to you personally? When have you noticed this phenomenon happening in your own life? And then after that, we usually we'll have a summary paper. I did this as my first deliverable, which is just a one quick little 3-question paper that asks them a fact, asks them something conceptual, and then asks them something personal, and they have to address it in class. So there'd be kind of a follow-up after class. So I see it as kind of an arc where they start with the experiment, we build through class, and then, so that the vocabulary and everything builds off the experiment as opposed to building off the chapter.
What'd your students say?
Well,
Oh,
feedback.
sorry.
That's
Sorry.
all right. I actually, the student who I was supposed to do this when we got into a car accident, unfortunately, she's fine now, but she wrote back to me, she was so apologetic because she couldn't do the review. So I had 2 other students from the same class do it. They were in my class last semester, last year I guess it was. And so I had 2 students, and I also had a peer. One of my peer reviewers is actually someone who's been very involved, if you recognize the initials, in the ADP stuff. So she reviewed and gave me feedback, and she really liked it. It's a lot of stuff here. And I think the main thing that, let's see, she said, she was asking me, the main question she had was about whether I'm going to be using it for grading or credit, or how I was going to score it. And my response to that in an email I sent her, I think also on a discussion board, was, I'm not really going to be grading these because I know that can be a huge a time commitment. My first year, I don't want to be spending too much time bogged down in the minutia of grading. But the fact that they've done it, they would get a check. They'd get something that indicates they've completed the assignment. And that's really what I look for. The only grading I can see doing is something that allows them, if they've completed the question correctly, to get the reward. And I do have to be careful. The one thing with these tests is, of course, they have to write the name in properly. They have to use the correct spelling, and so that's a little tricky. But
I would go more for like participation credit.
right. Well, it's participation credit.
Yeah.
They won't get a grade. It's just if they do it and they complete it, they'll get the check.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
That was the question I had then. So what are you gonna do if the students who don't do these?
Oh, the students who don't do these? Well, I mean, I do one every week. So if they absolutely don't do it, and this is a big part of the course, then their grade's going to suffer from it. I mean, this is part of the grade. I mean, it is a grade. They are expected to do this. This is an assignment to go through the experiment and the follow-up.
Okay, but I guess this seems to be asking. I was confused. So how is their grade going to suffer if they don't do it?
Well, I have a grade for like class participation, online participation. Class participation is made up of part of it. I have it divided. I have a rubric for it. There's classroom participation. There's online participation. I haven't, since it's the first time, I don't know how it'll play out, but probably about maybe 20% of their grade, if this is a hybrid class, is going to be doing this. And if a student comes to class never having done that, that's 20% of the grade. That will be a 0. If they do it, they get a point for every day they do it. So.
But you won't be holding 1 week's experiment hostage from the prior
No.
week. So
No.
So if somebody has a bad week and they just forget and whatever.
And I
they
always
do
drop one anyway. And I realize the beginning of the semester might be a little slow, so I may end up dropping 2 if the very first few weeks are tough. I want to have some exercise in the beginning, maybe even a practice one that won't be even.
And they have to do it that week. Suppose they're having illness, whatever issue.
You drop it. Well, it's like
but
homework
they can't come
anyway.
back 2 weeks later and do the thing for the given
No,
week.
because then we've discussed it and we've moved on, and there is a building process. We are going through a perceptual
They won't be able to
process.
access it if they want
They
to go
can
back?
access it. They can certainly go back and do it.
But you're not going to count it, is what you're saying.
Well, I'll grade everything at the end of the semester, so I guess unless I make part of it inaccessible, I guess they could go back and do it. I guess they could go back. It's a good question, and I haven't thought through whether I would let them go back and go through it or not, but I mean, I've always had things in class where you have to get it done, because I find that students who don't keep up, you get to the final exam and they're making up stuff from chapters 1 and 2, and it's kind of pointless. They're not keeping up with what we're doing. And I do expect, it's not an online class, it's a hybrid class. And if they're not keeping up with what we're doing in class, then they're not going to be keeping up with the discussion. They're going to be out of sync, and they're going to be frustrated because they don't know what we're talking about. And if we're really focusing on this aspect, this experiment, and they haven't done it, they're going to lose out.
I fully agree with that sentiment. The issue is how are you going to enforce it?
Well,
these are quizzes, right?
Yeah, they're
so
basically.
you can have due dates for the quizzes.
Right. Yeah, I can have the due date for the quiz, and then after the due date, if I want to I could make the reward come up regardless of whether they took the quiz. The quiz would just go away. Right. That was sort of what I was thinking, is that you'd have the thing that would be graded would go away, but the quiz would remain. And if we do it in the beginning, they'll learn this. I've had my students are generally pretty good about those weekly assignments. I have students do homework in my research methods class. They turn in homework, and they know if they don't, they get a 0 on it. I mean, I know it may not be with the thinking of online, but I still want them to keep up with assignments.
And I think you might get a more true, instance of who is actually doing the experiment. I mean, if you have 20 people in a classroom and you're doing an in-class experiment, there can always be that one person who's not counting the basketball, and somebody else hollers out 17 and they're like,
Oh, yeah, 17.
yeah, that's what I saw, right?
Right, right. So I think, and we're not asking them, this took 15 minutes for once. I think she said in her review that it took her 15 minutes to do it, at the most, and that was including watching the video. You know, we're taking away class time so that they can do this. So if they're really having trouble, I would prefer to know that they're having trouble early on. They can drop the class, they're allowed to withdraw. So it would be good to know that early on. And I always take the entire message in here so we have the whole thing. Mm-hmm. This was one that she said it took her 15 minutes. She was in my class last year, so she knows the process, she knows what this is. And her comment was about, actually it was the ADP presentation from last time. It was a PowerPoint PPTX, which was a good comment, even though it wasn't required for this. I do have to be aware that not all students have access to the X versions or the latest versions of some of these documents. So that was her comment. She did enjoy using it. She liked the video, the fact that it wasn't very long, and again, using the exercises, letting students do holding the students accountable was something that was good, and it didn't take up a lot of their time. And then I had a second student reviewer who, she enjoyed them, and her question, I think, was about answering questions 3 and 4 correctly. I'm not sure, maybe I had it set up wrong. It wasn't intended that they couldn't go back and fix it. They were supposed to be able to, if they'd gotten an incorrect answer, to go back in and fix it. So I need to work with that part of the software. I may have set something wrong that didn't allow her to go back. And she also asked if it's given the night before, do they have time? And as I mentioned, this assignment would be given probably Thursday or Friday after a Wednesday lecture, and then they'd have 4 or 5 days to complete the assignment. You know, I might even take it right up to the time class starts. So they'll have time to go back, go look over it. And I'm not preventing them from even talking with their friends about it. If people wanted to work in a group and found that useful, it's really just the process of going through the exercise. So again, they'll do it on their own, and then we can bring it up in class and discuss it in class, so they'll see it there too. And one other reviewer I had someone else who had looked at it. I don't think she actually commented on by email or on here. But one question she had is with the ADP, adaptive release process, and this was kind of an issue for me. The kind of going out and coming into things is a little awkward, and I don't know if there's a way around that. I think that's just how it is right now, that when you're using different formats, it's kind of popping. You do the video and then you pop in here. It'd be nice to have like a big shell and to be able to go boom, boom. I know it doesn't really work, but that would be terrific.
That was what I was gonna, I think there is. It's, and if not, you might need even a little video at the front end, so that students can see, here's what's gonna be part of the steps.
Right.
And you've gotta always hit the OK button. You've gotta mark things as reviewed for it to come up. But I think if they can see one in its entirety before you ask them to do it, it'll help them to see what they're gonna be going in. There may be some things that you can do is, embedding links to certain things, but if they have to do a lot of in the mainframe and then go back to the menu bar and all of that stuff, you might lose.
Yeah, and that's something that's going to take me a little time. I may have 1 or 2 exercises earlier on to get them set up, and I might hope, my plan is to have them all follow the same format so that once they're getting it, it doesn't change. So I always do experiment followed by quiz followed by follow-up, something where there's a process to it. It may vary somewhat because not all the experiments do work the same way, but if there's at least a similarity so they know what to expect, then I can have them try it 1 or 2 times, not for credit, just to sort of see, did you do it? And then they would be expected to be able to do it. And then, that way it becomes a much better exercise, because otherwise I have students coming to me saying, well, I couldn't access it, or I had this problem. I do get that in class, obviously.
You could do a syllabus quiz.
Yeah.
And say they can't get access to the experiments until they've done the quiz.
Right, that would be good. Yeah. So just as some next steps, as I was saying, I'm going to have at least 1 per week completed prior to class, and I use CogLab 2. That's it, among other things. So the idea, again, is finding that strategy that's consistent, or at least relatively consistent, so they know what they're doing. So having, if possible, to create that better flow so that there's not the scrolling back and in and out and all that stuff. clear, straightforward directions. Again, using a Jing video to explain it, to walk them through would be great. Make sure they're in readable formats, and then consider how I'm going to evaluate it, you know, whether, and I may have to tweak some things, or I may do the first class and have to reevaluate things later if it seems like it was unfair.
I think, John, you said the other day, and I haven't done this before, but you can post Jings to YouTube if you want, right? So, and one of the new features with YouTube is you can post them up and you can choose not to have them searchable, so it's kind of like Jing security by obscurity, right? So somebody's not going to just search for Diane Alonso in cognitive psych and then, you know, poof, there's your lecture. But one of the features in this Blackboard is to have YouTube mashups, they call it. So the video actually shows right there in the screen.
My daughter does those.
As opposed to opening up, like clicking on a link and opening up an external website or something like that. So,
okay.
So
yeah,
that might be something to kind of keep it right in that same window. So then when they're done, it's done, and then the next link from adaptive release would show up right below.
Yeah, I'm going to look into that.
Do you know HTML at all?
A little. I mean, it's been a long time, but
Whenever you look at any of the Blackboard links, there's usually an option to view the HTML source code, and as long as you can just check to make sure that they haven't done any target links where it opens up a new window, target equals _ new.
Okay.
You can either add those if you want it to open up a new window, or take them out of the HTML, and then it'll just embed it directly in there. But I think Karen's right that, you know, particularly with the YouTube stuff, it'll just show up right inside.
Yeah, it has a whole little player with controls, so that instead of clicking on a link and then going to YouTube site and then seeing all that extra trash that can, you know, take you off in another direction, like, ooh, what other videos is this?
Yeah, I gotta watch for that.
It's just, you know, start, stop, replay, kind of right there in the window.
Okay, I might play with that and see a little bit. So
just something I thought of.
Yeah, that's a thought. So these are the next steps for this particular assignment. And then again, some other hybrid options. Another thing I had thought about doing was this, for one of the first days, was that model building exercise. I mentioned it last time, sort of based on one of the previous videos I'd seen, just something to get them to think about, create a model, whatever you think, a model for attention or a model for memory, the memory process, and just get them trying to create a model as a group and using either a wiki or a discussion or something where they can discuss it prior to class and then coming into class to do a quick presentation on their models as a group. So I think. Cool. Here's and then questions. Or more questions.
You know, I'm going to go back to David's question because I think it's sort of central here. So you're taking a class that you have typically done as face-to-face.
Right.
You're looking at sort of the use of class time and moving more of the learning to sort of self-paced or what they can do themselves. I think it's really important to state to the students that you're doing this.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And why you're doing this.
Yes.
And that really sort of the bargain you're making with the students is that the flexibility of having class once a week or however many times they're coming to class versus what they would have done means that you're expecting them to participate on the activities that you have set up to be done online out of class. As such, I really think it is a participation credit, and that, you know, if you set up and say, I'm less interested in maybe the correct answer and more the attempt that you have done it, so that this class can continue to function the way it has done in the past. I know it sounds like just words, but I think if you set it up that way in terms of what the expectation is, and also that this is an experiment, maybe you'll adapt it and see how it goes forward. But you know, you're looking at this maybe initially as an administrative function, you know, in terms of, you know, how much time is spent, but I think you're also looking at how do people learn this way? You know, and it's a valid reason to do that, and, you know, really focus on the participation. There is a little bit of the kind of windows going back and forth in different windows. It gets a little distracting. And if you can, I think, streamline that down and come up with a process. I can tell you right now, you'll probably come up with 2 or 3 processes through this semester. So just accept that that's going to be the case. You'll do the refinements, and you'll have your process down pat in time for the next time that you do it. But you know, I think at least the feedback on the substance of what you're doing, the students seem to be hanging in there with you. how, you know, what to do with the, you know, the question of if they don't do it. I think what's lost is not so much that they get a wrong or a right answer, but they lose the participation credit.
Right. Oh, right.
And that either is or it is not enough of an incentive to move in that direction.
Right.
But it strikes me that you've had pretty good participation in the past, and I think that's the experiment. Can you continue it in a different model of delivery?
I have found, I mean, students, you know, not having done this on here, but I do find that students do tend to like to participate. I think the experiments are generally fun, and once the students give it a try, they seem to like it. I think if I can set that up, just as you say, so that it's not a scary quiz each week, but it's an option to get on, try something out that's kind of fun. It will take you maybe 10, 15 minutes or however long it's going to take you. And, you know, it's a participation grade. It's just a check off if you've done it. It's like when I do with my summary papers. I tell them, you know, this is not a test. It's not about so much, there's a part that's right and wrong answers, but it's not really about right and wrong. It's about getting you to think. It's getting you to review. It's the process of what you're doing. You're studying yourself. You yourself are the one doing the studying. And they seem to be better with things like that. I get some really good answers on my summary papers. It's kind of interesting because I tell them they're not really graded. It's a check-off, but some of them will give me these very long, in-depth answers. They've taken some real time to think about it. And I mean, I'm sure I'm gonna have students who don't wanna do this and don't bother. No one will fail the class if they don't do this. It's not gonna be that much of their grade that they'll fail the class, but they may not get their A or B. And like I say, I always do drop at least one.
Well, actually, I was wondering about that possibility, because you're going to do one a week, and this is like the regular 13-week semester, so there's going to be 13 experiments.
Well, they'll have quizzes, so any week that I would have a lecture. So for weeks where we have quizzes, I am still doing in-class quizzes, and that will be 3 weeks that they won't have that.
So how many of these you're going to do? You're going to do like 10 or something like that?
It'll probably come to about 9 or 10, yeah, probably about.
So I mean, one possibility is expecting that they do at least 6 out of 9 or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of the idea that they can drop a certain number.
Exactly, right. So it ends up, I think each year with like the summary papers, I do the same thing. I tell them we have 9 or 10 of them, we drop 1. So I take it's worth 2 points, they get their final score out of 18. And generally they do well. I mean, students tend to either do them all and maybe drop 1, or don't do any. I mean, I tend to have students on both ends, not too many who are really in the middle. And it's very few who don't really bother with something where it's kind of an easy, if you do it, you get credit. I try to explain to them, you just do it, you get credit.
Well, and if you really want to control, like I want you to do it by, your class is Wednesday, I want you to do it by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, because Tuesday evenings you're actually going to look at their answers and, you know, maybe compile a little bit of information so you can formulate how you want to step off on Wednesday. With the 30 people or whatever, I don't know how big your class is, someplace in that vicinity, you can look at the grade book and you just go to that quiz column. And if there's no attempt, you just 0, 0, 0, 0 and all those, and that, you know.
Yeah, I think an interesting question. I heard you say that you might let this go right up until class starts.
Yeah, I think what Karen says here, I like the idea of having the time to look at them and actually use their feedback.
Yeah. So that would be right before class?
No, Tuesday evening would be like 24 hours.
Or even the day before, I mean, cut it off on Sunday night, Monday, and then give yourself a couple days.
This is not a burdensome, onerous task that you're doing. And if I would not have it due right before class.
Right.
Because then you're sort of missing the benefit.
The benefits, right, exactly.
You put into this. I would also probably not let them go back to take a quiz and do it over again. They might be able to see the experiment, or they might be able to,
whether or not they
look at some of those things. But I think you have the right to kind of set the conditions for the learning environment however you want to do it, including what version of PowerPoint they have. You can say, this class requires that you have this version. You can set any kind of conditions that you want, as long as you tell them up front.
Right.
And if you tell them that, you know, this is done Sunday night, it's easy points if you do it.
Yeah.
So do it.
Right.
You know, but I think if you sort of apologize or ask for permission to kind of keep this extended, then you're starting to creep back into all of the focusing of the learning at the specific date and time that they meet. And now you've got the disadvantage of you've got less time to do it.
Yeah. No, I think with this, I mean, it will be set. It will be something that will say this, just like I do with the summary papers. They're very specific guidelines. This will turn on, and I will have a date. It will be Thursday at such and so time, and it will turn off at Tuesday at 5 p.m., something that's reasonable. You have all that time, any time in there, you can do it, but it has to be done by then. After that, I collect the data. I do this, actually, I have been using Blackboard for many years to do all my students who do independent research and independent, the internships, they send me weekly status reports. Their grade is, it's pass, fail course, their grade is, did you turn in your status reports? I check them off. If they didn't turn it in, it's a 0. If they turn it in, it's a 1. It's very easy. I've really not had any problems with that at all. Now, granted, these are students who want to do independent work, but you know, I make it very clear. You turn it in. That week shuts off at midnight. If you didn't get it in, turn one in next week. Don't miss too many of them.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's fair. I don't think it's unfair to them.
Yeah.
So.
Cool.
I was wondering about, I think I saw this would be a possibility, like for each of these things, of asking the students to give another example, like with the, you know, the inattentive blindness, is that what you call it? And then the issue, and I know you don't want to get too burdened with grading, then the issue is that example really a good example of the phenomenon in question, which, I mean, to me it could be a beneficial discussion.
Right.
Whether it fits into the category or not.
And actually the benefit of that is exactly what Karen said. If I collect their data, keep everything there, and I keep it anonymous, then we could go through in class time and say, is this a good example? Is this, and let the students even have input.
Scan through. So, you know, lots of people came up with a blah, blah, blah. Let's address these 2 particular examples here. You know, offer up a good one and a bad one. Don't say who offered them up.
Right.
But then, and that's your jumping off point, right? I mean, somebody might give you something that'll segue into whatever your next topic is, or give you an example you've never thought about before, or something that's ambiguous, or, you know.
Yeah, so I like that, the idea of being able to look at them in the 24-hour window before, really come up with something, and then I can really tailor my discussion and lecture to what they've done, as opposed to a, you know, standard pre-created, you know, I'd certainly have a base presentation, but I could
maybe you get half your class gives you bad examples, as David just said. They give you,
why isn't this an
maybe
example?
they're lazy ones, right? And you can tell who's just trying to game the system and just typing anything in there. But then maybe there's some
really good. And then we might see that as things are put up on the board, that, you know, even though they would be anonymous, the students might say, wow, you really do want to try and come up with a good example because it might go up on the board.
Or she's checking what, ooh, I gave you an example, you know, she's actually reading our responses.
Exactly, yeah, that actually shows more.
It's not for naught.
Exactly. Yeah, I like that. I think that really helps.
Sort of a just-in-time teaching.
Yeah. Anything else, John?
No, I think you're on the right track. So, 9 or 10 of these, how long does it take you to do?
Put this together? I knew I've used the video before. The questions are pretty straightforward. 2 hours maybe?
Okay. I think it's worth kind of just mental note, you know, kind of what your production process is, how long it takes you to do. And it would be a good thing, you know, either, you know, just check in or even just tell us, you know, the experiment was moving some stuff that's in class face to face, and what was the benefit, you know, or what was the cost to you or the students. I mean, one of the things you talked about was not taking up the class time with the sort of joint viewing of the video. Now you're sort of pushing that off to everybody doing it on their own. Does it enrich the discussion that takes place in class? Does it contextualize your lecture, maybe more so than you would have done in the past? Those are, I think, really interesting questions to think about as you go through this, because you know, everybody who goes through it the first time, there is a little bit of a time sink. There's a bit of a time sink. The payoff may not be quite what you're looking for, but with some tweaks, can it be where you would want to do it? A good test was, after you do it this semester, do you want to do it again? You know, is this something that you think you want to do again? I'd be interested in what. And
it's something I definitely want to track. And I will say the offloading of.
Yes, around there, I think.
All right.
No, it looks good.
All right, thank you.
Bravo.